So, on to our first speaker, who this evening will be Helen Browning from the Soil Association, and describes herself as an organic farmer. The bio I have in front of me is quite impressive. Helen has a very mixed organic farm in Wiltshire with dairy, beef, pigs, cereals, and is now experimenting with agroforestry. Her products are sold through the Helen Browning's organic brand in retailers big and small, as well as her own mini hotel, dining pub on the farm, and through her restaurant in Swindon. Her recent book, Pig, Tales from an Organic Farm, written with her partner Tim Finney, tells more about the trials and tribulations of her farming and food life. She has been Chief Executive of the Soil Association since 2011, and after a long involvement with the charity in a variety of exec and non-exec roles, she is a member of the Food Ethics Council, trustee of the RSPB, and a commissioner for the Food, Farming and Countryside Commission. She sits on the BBC's Rural Affairs Advisory Committee and is the National Food Strategy and on the National Food Strategy Advisory Panel. Prior to rejoining the Soil Association, Helen was Director of External Affairs for the National Trust. She has had a number of roles in agri-politics over the years, including the government's Policy Commission on Future of Farming and Food, which I think was the Curry Commission, and chaired the England Animal Health and Welfare Implementation Group. Helen was awarded an OBE in 1998 for her services to organic farming. Helen, that's an impressive CV. Could I ask everybody to pin back their ears and speak to our first speaker this evening, Helen Browning, OBE. Thank you, Helen.
Very much, Richard, and lovely to be here this evening. You set a tough brief. It's kind of, one word brief for our talks this evening. It's a bit like when you're at school and you had that sort of essay competition, write an essay on the theme of inspiration, which is always a bit daunting. I thought I might kind of talk a little bit more about motivation, actually, to start with anyway. Really what sort of, got me off my backside and still does get me off my backside every day to try and do something in this world. You've given a lot of detail about what I do and what I've done over the years in your introduction, very kind. As you say, I'm CEO of the Soil Association, and I think it's great to be doing that role coming from quite a practical farming background. And, I was lucky in many ways because I grew up on the farm I now run. So my father came to the farm here in 1950. We're tenants of the church commissioners. And I sort of grew up here and started to think about the direction of farming quite early on, I guess. So lots of adventures along the way, but people always ask initially, what got you started? Why did you get going down this road? Because, I have been so lucky, all the things you've just mentioned there, the opportunities I've had to get involved in agricultural politics and what's going on around the place over the last 35 years. It's been an extraordinary privilege. And it all really started from the fact that I decided quite early on that I wanted to have a go at exploring organic farming and championing what it was about. And for me, a lot of that started from concerns, I guess, so more a sense of outrage, actually, more than anything else in my late teens, mid-late teens and early 20s, about what I could see happening to farming, even the farm here around us. The way we were ripping out the hedges to make room for the bigger, ever bigger machinery, getting concerned about the way wildlife was disappearing. I could see that happening on the farm here. And starting and feeling quite a lot of social inequity as well. Farm workers 35, 40 years ago didn't have the best lives, and they were, I felt quite acutely the difference between the lives we had living in the big house, the big farmhouse, and the way staff were living on the farm. But I guess for me, one of the biggest turning points was when I did my degree in agricultural technology at Harper Adams and was taken to see supposedly state-of-the-art at the time, pig and poultry units in particular, and had a real, I'm not a squeamish person, I've spent half my life in abattoirs, but I was really shocked by the way those systems were being run at that time. It was probably, you know, in the early mid 80s, some of the worst times for, you know, in terms of animal welfare. And I really didn't feel that was the way I wanted to go. On the farm here, we'd always been a mixed farm, even though we were by no means organic. And we had, you know, free-ranging dairy cows and beef and sheep, as well as our arable crops. But I decided that I really had to try and to take up a farming system that was going to show it was possible to give our farm animals a good life, as well as to make them commercially viable. And I had other real concerns too, not just about the direction that farming was taking and the damage that it was doing, but I had concerns about our own future as a farming family. I felt that the Common Agricultural Policy wouldn't continue to support us for very much longer. Of course, it did continue for another 30-something years. And I felt that we were just producing commodities that we had very little opportunity to add value to, very little connection with customers, and that if we wanted to have a more resilient future, we needed to make a much closer connection with the final consumers of our product and to start to take the future into our own hands a bit. So there was a big kickback from me in terms of wanting to try and be more independent, I guess, and to be able to add value to what we did, to be less reliant on government support and the CAP. And for me, organic farming, which I'd sort of tripped over, I was lucky. I spent a year when I was doing my degree. I had to fight quite hard to be allowed to go as part of my industrial placement. I was the first research student on the first project that government ever sponsored, looking at the difference between organic and conventional farming systems. So I spent a year up on the top of Salisbury Plain, a wonderful farmer, Barry Wookey, who'd gone organic in the early 70s. Sort of, you know, digging up for earthworms, exploring nitrate leaching, pests and diseases, really got my hands dirty in terms of understanding what I hadn't been taught at college, actually, about the nutrient cycles, about the way the soil worked, about the importance of earthworms, all those kind of things that are fundamental to all good farming systems, not just organic ones. And that year convinced me not that organic farming was necessarily the solution to all our problems, but that it was a really important thing to explore, that there was a real opportunity to try and work out, a little bit like an athlete might decide to see how fast they can run without the drugs. I was, when I came back to the farm here, constantly being pursued by various reps from companies telling me that I was going to, increase my yield by this much if I use that product, and if I use this fertilizer, I was going to. And I thought, oh, go away, all of you. Let me just see what I can do farming with the resources I've got on my own farm, and see if I can make this system of organic farming, which was already underway, but not widely being taken up at that point in the sort of early mid 80s. See what I can do with that. And for me, it was almost like a giant research project. And so I guess for me, that inspiration, motivation theme, it's a little bit about finding your cause, finding what it is that you want to get stuck into. What's the project that's going to really keep you motivated and inspired through your working life? And organic farming really did that for me. We started off converting just one of the two dairies. We thought, well, always been interested in research, so let's run one organically, one conventionally, see how they compare. I started doing lots of trials on one small area of the farm, looking at things like intercropping, some of the sort of pasture cropping ideas that are now coming to the forefront, but felt quite avant-garde at the time. We had our first house of laying hens. We had our first 2 saddleback gilts, from which came our whole pig business. And we tested these things initially on quite a small scale, partly just to get the farm, as well as me, confident that we could go down a different road. You can imagine, I was 24 when I was able to take over the farm, and most of the staff were male, twice my age. and very nervous about the idea of a young female boss who had all these very different ideas about the way things might be done, including how we might work together, because I'd come back with quite strong ideas about team working and all this kind of stuff, whereas they'd been told what to do at 7:30 in the morning in a very sort of normal, as it was at the time, you know, Jim, you plough that field. Nobody was kind of involved in that decision-making process. So I came back with all those ideas, and it was good to have a small patch of the farm that we tested them out on for a year or two to try and get people more confident and interested in the route I was pretty determined we were going to go down. Now, I haven't got time this evening. I've only got a short 15 minutes, so we're going to have a few questions before I have to disappear. To tell you the whole story. There's been so many twists and turns along the way, particularly actually involved with the marketing of what we do. I think people often say, oh gosh, you know, the reason your organic farming's worked is because you've actually added value and done all these things. We sort of put our brand into the retailers. We work with lots of the bigger box schemes. To be honest, I think the real trials as well as the tribulations have come through trying to take our products to market. That's been a real roller coaster ride. And Richard, you mentioned the book I did a couple of years ago. There's a little bit more if you ever want to know more about some of that in there. And so for me over the years, as well as motivation and a bit of inspiration, it's been about resilience, I think, and perseverance. I think a lot of the ideas that we tried to put into practice and the values we wanted to bring to farming and food, you have to stick at this stuff. It's interesting now, I find this certainly at the Soil Association end, a lot of those ideas, whether they're taking form through regenerative farming or agroecology, or whatever you want to call it, it's the same set of ideas as to how we can farm with nature, make room for nature in our farming, and feed people healthily, well, whilst looking after our farmers. They're the same set of ideas. And now the world's kind of ready for them. It's really interesting at the moment how much interest there is in all of this, how many of your more progressive farmers are really doing amazing work and really starting to think about soils in a way that even 10 years ago, certainly in the eastern counties, it was really hard to get any traction on. So the world's changing really fast. I have absolutely no regrets about my farming career and where it's led me. It's been wonderful when you've got something that you have got some expertise in, that you feel really committed to, how many doors that opens in terms of people wanting you to come around the table and share some of that. And so the opportunities I've had to do that, where, you know, all through the years have been amazing. And I still find it an extraordinary life to be involved with now, to have this mix of practical farming. My daughter's now involved with the farm with her husband. We've got a new dairy set up on the downs. We're rearing lots of beef and we're adding value to our beef as well as to our pigs. The dynamic of it all is changing as we go into the next generation. But we have had great fun doing all of this. And in the last 15 years, as you mentioned, we've been running initially the village pub, now the village pub with a mini hotel with 12 rooms, all themed after fields on the farm. We're running catering up on the Ridgeway for the walkers through COVID. We've opened a shop on the farm. We're doing home delivery direct to customers, as well as through other retailers. And so, you know, alongside that perseverance and that resilience, we've had to be very agile. We've tried lots of stuff. I'm a terrible one for, you know, people don't like it when I go on holiday because they know I'll come back with about another 10 ideas that we want to do. But we've started stuff and we've stopped it when it's not working. You have to be agile. And through this lockdown, I think our businesses have shown huge agility. We've built an outdoor kitchen at the pub in the last couple of months so that we can serve people really well in the garden through the summer, all sorts of things. To me, there are massive opportunities everywhere you look at the moment. Loads of pitfalls, loads of risk, loads of change coming, but there are loads of opportunities. And yet I think for me, you know, in terms of what keeps me going day by day, you know, it is that cause, that kind of having something that I care about, that I want to make happen, having a bit of a vision for that. The farm itself and seeing it flourish on a good day. It's been pretty hard the last few weeks in this terrible drought, but seeing the farm coming to life, seeing people's enjoyment of the farm, seeing them loving the bird life, getting excited about what we're doing here. And the amazing people who have kind of flooded into this place over time, both in my sort of, you know, on the farm and within the Soil Association, the energy they bring. People say, how do you do it all? I don't do anything. I just create a space where lots of other people come and do amazing things. And I think that's been a real privilege. But what keeps me motivated, I guess, more than anything else these days, is still that sense of urgency. And that sense of urgency, actually, I think, is building more and more. We're moving into probably the most important decade that humanity's ever faced. If we don't turn the climate change tanker around in this decade, if we don't actually sort out the biodiversity loss, if we don't actually start to deal with human health so that we're not so badly stricken by things like COVID, because there'll be more of them over the next decade, we won't have a very positive existence on this planet. And farming is right at the heart of all of that. Farming and the way we manage and use our land, all the pressures on the land that there are now for development, for rewilding, for reforesting, all of these things are putting huge pressure on our land. And farming at the moment, if you look at it globally, is a huge part of the problem. And yet everybody in this room will know that it can be a huge part of the solution. And our job as farmers, as managers and lovers of the land, is to turn farming from being a problem into a solution over the next 10 years. And that really motivates and inspires me.